Okay, first of all, thank you for allowing us to invite Duncan to be here. Thank you for the Dean Zhang and my Dean Sandy. Yeah, also Zhang. Okay, and so I will keep. You mentioned about formal introduction, so I need to do it.
No pressure now, no pressure.
Short introduction, brief introduction.
So Professor Duncan Brumby is, I forget, it's world leading human computer interaction scholar and design. So he is currently professor in the University College London, also the editor-in-chief of one of top tier HCI journal. It's called International Journal of
Human Computer Studies.
Okay,
There we go.
yeah, everyone.
Not the other one. Not interaction. Not the other one.
It's more important.
Yeah, exactly. Interaction.
Yeah. We talk about particularly that journal is about how the human-computer relationship. So why that is because Duncan's background is from psychology. He graduated from psychology in Cardiff, and before me to join the same lab. So you probably the final students all enjoy in
Cardiff. That's right. Yeah.
I'm the first students of Android in Manchester.
Yes.
Yeah. So actually, we are kind of classmates.
Yes, almost. Yeah. Just as I was writing up, you were starting.
Yeah. So it's 2005. So we already know each other for many years. Yeah. So but it's very difficult for us to meet together. So we sometimes meet in Thai conference. Mm-hmm. And then that's interesting one in 2006 in Florence. And normally we meet people in party after the conference. Okay, so we went to a conference. It's hosted by the University of Toronto, right? Yeah, it's very wild and very loud, and then the house owner threatened us, if you don't stop, I'm going to call police. So then we stopped. And then another one, interesting one is Hawaii one, right? Just we went to the nature swimming pool.
Yeah.
Down, very difficult to walk down to the mountain.
Literally down the side of a mountain into the sea. Yeah.
I almost died. I tell you that. And so we have a lot of story, and majorly is we both care about human-centered values. More is our study core, and then it's about today's study as well. So it's from the individual psychology to society. So today's talk is about rebuilding the digital town square. So it's like people meet in the town square, right? And then how to rebuild it and how to design a social media in order for meaningful connection, not only connection, meaningful connection. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Duncan. And let's give him a welcome.
Thank you, Yang-Chi. Really nice introduction. But yeah, I think this trip's been many years in the making. So Yang-Chi's visited us at UCL for a sabbatical, and I think we talked about me coming out to visit Taiwan. It was probably like 4 years ago we first started talking about this trip. So yeah, I'm really happy to it's finally come. It's been with patience, these things come true. So thank you for all your work to make this happen. Really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone showing up today and for the invitation to speak here. It's really appreciated. I hope you find the topic of today's talk interesting. So what I wanted to speak about, so this is the ACM Interactions magazine. So if you're a member of the ACM, you'll probably get this magazine delivered to you. So it's got high distribution. So that's very nice. It's often like whenever I visit other labs. It's always the magazine that's kind of like floating around other HCI faculty members' offices. So I had an article in the issue that came out in June, and that's kind of what I wanted to speak about today, some of the thoughts that were behind that article and kind of what inspired it. It was called Rebuilding the Digital Town Square, Designing Social Media for Meaningful Connection Again. And so yeah, I want to talk to you about this article, so I was quite excited by it. And really what was driving it, I wrote it after the, in late December, early January, so during, for us, the holiday period, Christmas. And there's a long tradition, maybe from previous generations. So, you know, a generation or two before me would write letters to friends and family at that time of year. So like a year in review. So it's a time of year for pause and reflection, and you write to friends and family and say what's happened during the year, what you've been most excited about and what you've been most proud about, and some of the challenges you've experienced. And it's a way of kind of keeping up with each other. This kind of and I think all societies, all human societies and cultures do this, right? Obviously, there's, you know, in the UK, we've got this around Christmas, but I think if you move around different cultures, there's going to be a similar holiday of reflection in the year that comes. And for us, it just happens during the dark, very dark, cold months. So it seems appropriate. And so it was at this period, I was having a moment of reminiscing of, you know, I'm getting older now, and reminiscing on the younger childhood days. And I don't know about you, but if you've moved around as you've grown up, or whether you're still in touch with your friends from when you were, say, 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, some of you will still be friends with those people that you had, those close friends at like 10 years old, 9 years old. And some of you will have not spoken to those people that, like your best friends from that age, for many years. So this year I thought was a nice time to reach out, right? And this is a basic need. So, you know, one of the earliest social media platforms I remember using, and this was a long time ago, this was before Facebook. This was probably around, this is when I was at Cardiff, at the start of my PhD, so around 2002. Friends Reunited was very popular.
Only in UK?
No, I think it's also, it's where it's primarily focused on. I think there was a whole suite, I think it's got bought by, it's one of these failed social media platforms. But the general idea was like, it was premised on this idea of reconnect with your old school friends, those old childhood friends that you've not spoken to for years. And of course now we all have Facebook, right? It's the global leader, and it's still the biggest social media platform that exists, with, you know, some staggering proportion of the world's population having accounts on this platform. So if you want to find that old long-lost childhood friend, Facebook's probably a good place to look. And that's exactly what I did. In fact, no, these childhood friends I'm talking about, I actually am Facebook friends with. And so I just reached out and messaged them. And this is the thing, is that there was silence. I waited for a reply, and no reply came. And so I wondered, well, maybe they just don't want to talk to me. And I felt sad for a moment. But then I thought, no, there's probably more to this. I mean, for as long as we've had social media and social media accounts, I mean, we've all threatened to quit, right? I certainly remember leaving Facebook for good in 2008, like a year after I made my account. And I think what did that for me was, I think I hadn't figured out privacy settings, and I realized I was told by a colleague that all the students could see my posts, and that bothered me. So I remember going, okay, this is too much, oversharing. And so I wanted this to only be visible to friends, and I think I quit for good. But then I think I rejoined 6 months later and realized that, you know, privacy had been improved, you could change the settings, and it was all good. But there are various reasons why people threaten to quit. I mean, this year in particular, when I was writing this article, this was in January, this was the whole period with Trump coming back into the White House and all that stuff that was happening around. There's a lot of focus on social media. And in particular, Meta, the parent company of Facebook, put out this decision so at the beginning of January this year to remove fact checkers, so people that used to like check and to stem the spread of false information. And so a lot of my US-based friends were understandable, particularly the more liberal-leaning ones that were maybe already a little bit upset with Trump being re-elected, had a big freak out over this, right? And so there was a torrent of people saying, I'm quitting Facebook for good, never to touch it again, right? It's done. But it's not just Facebook, right? The HCI community used to gather on Twitter. And it was the platform where, I mean, I spend at least an hour or two a day on Twitter. And it was nice because that, you know, this international research community that we're part of around the CHI conference, the HCI research community, it was a shared space where people talked about that common interest and built community, especially around events like the deadline of the CHI conference, which is a big deal each year. You'd have people posting there like, you know, 2 minutes before the deadline, we've just submitted our papers, photographs. You'd have people talking about the decision outcomes. You know, everyone, you know, you look on these platforms and it's different to LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is just everyone boasting about, I got these papers accepted, this award accepted, blah. On Twitter, we're like, no, all my papers got rejected, and I feel sad, right? So it felt more authentic, more real, more genuine. But it's gone, right? It's totally gone, right? So Musk bought Twitter and renamed it, and just everyone left, right? Similar, I mean, particularly the same kind of demographic that I was talking about there, the kind of more, you know, we'll talk about people who work in universities, more liberal leaning, they all kind of ditched this. And these platforms have been kind of retained by the more right leaning, particularly in the US culture, right? So, I mean, I just don't see anyone, you know, I think I occasionally open up Twitter now, X, sorry, but it's like, it's basically dead as far as I'm concerned for our community. And what you saw, you know, the great thing about technology is it constantly reinvents itself. There's always a new platform, a new day, a new dawn. And everyone kind of like, particularly Mastodon was the one that everyone initially ran off to, say, hey, I'm starting over there. It's all just a bit weird and geeky though. You know, it just doesn't seem to have the same, you know, Twitter seemed to be that town square where people were quite honest and open and everyone was on that platform. And I think what's happened is that you've got this fragmentation across these other platforms which has started to emerge, but they're not really at the same kind of visibility or same kind of traction in a way. But yeah, let's think back, and so that's the kind of background to what got this article started. It's this desire. What's the purpose of social media platforms? Why are people going to them? They're going to them to build community, whether it's a work-based community like we saw on Twitter with the CHI community, people talking about working hard for a deadline, sharing outcomes, whether it be good or bad. And it wasn't just, you know, LinkedIn is this polished, curated, boastful thing. What was really nice about Twitter was it was felt very honest, right? People would rant and they would share more honest feelings, especially of things like around rejection, which helped to normalize that, right? To help people kind of adjust to that, get their own expectations right. But the trouble is that these platforms kind of stop and start, right? And they sometimes struggle a little bit. And if we take a step back and like, what is the big elephant in the room? It's almost the thing that the HCI researchers, scholars, don't talk about. So you go to the CHI conference, it's funny, the one thing that's never talked about, the money, right? And this is what's a major driver factor. I mean, it's interesting because the CHI community is intersecting with industry. We have many people in our community who work for the big tech companies. And the money is visible when they all lose their jobs at the flick of a hat, right? You know, the big tech layoffs that we saw a couple of years ago where suddenly whole departments and divisions were gutted overnight, right, just to balance the spreadsheets. So the money is real, but somehow in academia we don't tend to, like, we kind of go, you know, we focus on getting grants, but that's more about the prestige of winning grants, right, really, rather than the money. And instead we kind of go, okay, but let's not really look at the commercial pressures. Let's think about what people are actually wanting from these products. But the commercial pressures are real. And I want to just tell this little story. So back in 2005, so when I first met Yang-Chi, I also met Bill Gates that year as well. So Yang-Chi and Bill Gates, there we go. So two important people that met in the same year, 20 years ago. So during that summer of 2005, I was interning at Microsoft Research in Redmond with Ed Cottrell and Mary Zawinski and Eric Horvitz. And we were doing eye tracking studies of people doing desktop searches. So like Apple, think about Apple Spotlight, how you can search your documents. That was like seen as the big exciting thing at that point in time. And they had built a novel platform called FAT. And with that, you could then search your documents and try and find things on that. And we ran during that summer an eye tracking study where we brought people in to do eye tracking searches of interfaces. So I was really interested in eye tracking, and I think, you also did eye tracking as well for your PhD work with Andrew too. So we both had a common background there of doing work around visual search. Yeah. And as a special perk that summer, we all got invited to Bill Gates' house for a party. So that was very nice. But I still remember this, there was one person, one intern, who declined. He said, no, I'm not going to go to Bill Gates' house. I'm too busy. I've got too much work to do. I thought that was a fool. Maybe I'm very curious to remember who that person actually was, because they're either, it was inconsequential. I'm curious to know what work they were actually doing that day. Needless to say, it was very meaningful to go to Bill Gates' house. And we spent the afternoon, a good 3 hours in the garden, and he spent like a good 2.5 hours talking to us interns. It was only about 80 of us, so quite a small group. And they call it the donut. So Bill stands in the middle, and then everyone stands around. And he would just take questions and conversation for 2.5 hours constantly. So that was very interesting. And it was during this, and I remember this distinctly because of the eye tracking, but it was pre-Facebook. So social media had not yet become a thing. And I remember him saying something along the lines of, tech companies should soon be paying you for time with your eyeball, right? For paying you for looking at stuff. And what he was aware of was what was beginning to happen here is that the advertisers were starting to win, right? So all the money in tech, pre that era, so if we think about just before that period, it was the period of operating systems. Microsoft made all their money with Microsoft Word and Excel, buying suites of products. They don't make money from that anymore. Now it's most of the money is, then that next wave, it was the advertisers' money, looking on social media platforms and serving you up content. And so, as you'd expect for a tech leader, he was obviously watching the future trends there and was aware that that was happening. And that's what we've seen here with these products and systems, right? So I have this line. I originally said in my article it was like repeatedly going down the same railroad tracks, but the editor changed it to no, it's more like being caught on a hamster wheel. And it's got worse with AI, right? So these kind of like deep neural networks at these platforms, it feels sometimes that you have a thought about something or you discuss something with a friend, and then the next time you pick up your phone, stuff is being served up. It's like it just listens to your soul, right? It knows what you want, and before you know it, you're getting that. And it's a thorny thing, right? Because you can see the commercial pressures that are operating there to give you this personalized content. So content which is of interest to you, right? But it's a double-edged sword because many people think of the internet as their social media feed, but it gets narrower and narrower. So if suddenly you start getting into, kittens, and you're thinking about getting a new kitten, and you start researching that, what type of cat should I get? Before you know it, your social media platform will be filled with cat content, right? Because there's a lot of cat content on the internet. And you could replace that, let's say you want some new running shoes. Again, you're going to get lots of that. Or let's say you're in a particular type of music or a particular band or a particular TV show. It doesn't matter what it is. The moment you start getting an interest, it almost becomes hyper-fixated on that, and it just starts serving up the same content over and over and over again because it's absolutely just keeping you scrolling, right? And that's the tension in a way. At one level, it's serving you up stuff that you're interested in, But at the same time, it's utterly boring as well. Let's be honest, right? And it's not allowing you to kind of like look out and see what else and to reset. Sometimes there's no, one of the things we talk about in this article is there is no reset button. You can say see a little less of this, but you can't actually do a hard reset. So as a result of this, and it's worse than that because there's so much advertising content in relation to actual genuine content. It started out, I remember when Facebook first started, it was very little advertising content. It was just people, it was user-generated content. People were actually posting about their life. And then suddenly that fell away and it got replaced by this commercial content. So it feels like less and less that people are actually sharing real content. So as a result, it just becomes a bit boring, so people threaten to leave. And so refer you back to the article for this. That's the kind of basic arguments we're going to talk through. But now I want to transition into the next stage, which is to think about, okay, so what are we turning to these platforms for? What is it about social interactions? And I think coming together as people and talking, that's important, right? It's what we do. We are social creatures. And these platforms, first and foremost, were originally designed, going back to that pitch of reconnecting with old friends, they were designed as a space, not where you could watch cat videos or look at adverts for new running shoes. No, it wasn't an advertiser's delight. It was a place where you went to find out about what your friends were doing, right? And, to connect with people. So, the most obvious way, humans have been on this planet for a long time, and our brains have evolved to suit the environment in which we live and to kind of maximize, our chances of survival. And so we are social creatures. We work together, and the most basic form of interacting with somebody is to go for a walk with them. We walked here this morning. There's something really beautiful about, and call me old-fashioned, but if you have a choice about, wanting to catch up with somebody, go for a walk, right? Rather than using a digital platform. There's something about the cadence of walking, you're moving together, and when people are walking, you can see, you can tell when people, in a crowd, like think when you're on the subway, you can see who's actually together, right? The people that are walking and talking together, because their steps are more in line, they stay closer together, and it's that kind of natural pairing that happens. And it's often in very small groups as well. If you've ever walked with larger groups, a large family gathering, a group of friends, usually when you get to about 6 people, 8 people, it starts splintering. And it naturally forms into like those smaller clusters where the kind of conversations kind of happen and you can move between them. Not to mention, you're just getting some exercise as well, which is a good thing in this day and age. Obviously, but there are issues with walking. It only works, it's intimate, but it works only for small groups of people, and you have to be physically located together. And obviously, we live in an age and in a world where we can maintain relationships internationally, right? And so that first started really with, the invention of the telephone, the ability to make long-distance calls, probably the telegram before that. But the telephone was a pivotal invention because you could have live conversation with another human being on another continent. So you could travel vast distances and have that sense of a real conversation. And with the telephone, it's a fascinating piece of technology, really. But there's a whole bunch of design choices that were put into that. So there's a nice phrase that we reference in this article from Barry Brown and Mark Perry's work about the idea that the early telephones, just think of the original telephone, right? The original, it doesn't have an off switch or a mute mode or a silent option. It could be rung at any moment. And so with that design choice, what you had to have happen was a whole bunch of social norms and customs developed around when it was appropriate to call. So not to call too late or not to call too early, and only reserve, family calls on a certain day of the week. So for us, it was in Sundays growing up. And so it became these whole bunch of customs and cultures developed around ultimately design choices that were made. We had this Kai paper going back, this is when was this? 2014, so 11 years ago now. So we had a very nice Kai paper reflecting on the design of, this has got you can still make telephone calls on this, right? And there's a phone app on it. So looking at the design of the phone app on smartphones, and just kind of like observing that very little had changed, as in it's still, even to this day, primarily somebody calls you and you've got to accept or decline, right? There's not really much to it. And in particular, I'm not going to play this video actually. In particular, the default up until recently was to always have these kind of full screen notifications. So there you were watching your favorite video, playing your favorite game, and your pesky friend or relative has the indecency to call you and distract you from your game, right? And not only that, it's a full screen notification. So what drove this work was to pick up on this kind of idea that the phone was actually, even though we call it a phone, it's not really a phone, it's a small, don't know why we call it a phone, it's a small computer, right? It's our gaming device, it's our TV device. And was to pick up on this idea that the full screen notification wasn't the best design. So we explored, ignore the middle one, that's kind of useless. But on the end there, you've got the ribbon notification, so just at the top. And so this was presented 11 years ago at CHI. And then just a few months later, we had this video came out from Google. It kind of rooted this idea that a ribbon notification is a better design choice for phone apps. It allows you to multiplex, so continue to use two apps at once. So the phone call is no longer interrupting your game, right? So you can carry on playing. You could hear the crowd cheer. They're like, finally, right? I can play my game uninterrupted, right? Don't have to put Do Not Disturb on. So this seems like a better design idea, and that's taken forward. So even Apple eventually caved. So a couple of years ago, they also made a similar change. It's not the default, but you can still go in there and make that change. If I just go back to our paper, though, so this is the CHI 2011 paper. Sorry, let me go this way, actually. There it is. So we put this app on the App Store 11 years ago. It was called Cool Heads. It was downloaded within a few months by a reasonably large number of people, and they started using it. And there were two versions. It was done with German colleagues. There were two versions. One which was the kind of like, there's no tracking, and then another one where you opted in for research tracking, and then we could kind of get some anonymous data on how you're using the app. And from that, we looked at insights from the usage data. So this was people's in the wild use. And what it was tracking here was when calls were received on a person's phone. And the first thing to notice was that 33%, so a third of calls that people were receiving to their phone were happening while they were using another app. So there was a degree of interruption there, or multitasking there. The user had to make a choice. And of those, about half were accepted. So I've done a lot of research in multitasking, and so what's happening there is you basically got a choice between two activities. You can only attend to one of them, and you make a choice. Yes, this call is more important to me. It's from a close family member, it's from a close friend, and really I'm just like playing this silly game. It's not that important to me. I'll take the call and speak to this person. But interestingly, there's this other percent down here. So 8% were actively declined. They're like, nope, go away. But the rest here, 36%, were just left passively unanswered. So it's a bit like, I see you, but I'm not going to, And I think, again, talking about these kind of customs and cultures, in the same way that it was when the telephone was first invented, we had to learn when it was too late to call. I think what we're developing here is also similar kind of customs and behaviors. It's like when you call somebody and they don't answer, they almost certainly are watching, but they're not going to actively decline, because then that says, I don't want to speak to you. Instead, it's like, oh no, sorry, I missed your call. And it's like, what is it? Because I didn't have my phone with me. It's just, it's this kind of like little white lie. It's socially acceptable, but everyone knows. And that's the irony. This is the deep irony of the modern world we've created, is that, this thing is like a little over 20 years old, right? Since the iPhone first was made. And, I've got kids, and when their phones break or they get lost, especially teenagers. Can you imagine if you've lost your phone? And can you imagine the situation? You lost your phone, you don't have a replacement, and you have to wait 7 days for a new one. 7 days without a phone. How many days would you go? I mean, how much money would you spend in order to get it faster, right? This should be the new business model for the replacement phone. I promise to get it to you within 2 hours. That comes with an extra premium, right? It's this idea, we can't live without this device. It's the first thing we look at in the morning. It's the last thing we look at night. We look at it while we're traveling. We look at it in the evening at home. We look at it, during meals with family, it's everywhere. Everyone's on their phone all the time, looking for this source of entertainment. And it's ironic because we're always on, yet it's often quite hard to actually genuinely connect and to reach other people. And it's funny, Facebook was listening. So I got served this up in Facebook this morning. And so I showed it to Yang Chi, and he said, yeah, it's pretty funny, actually. I thought it was almost, it's picked up on the theme of the talk, really, And it's that, we're all together. It's like, you're distracted and you'll put your blinkers on. You see no one, hear no one, and you're just immersed in your own world. So, another part of the story. So at the same time as I was writing this article, I got contacted by a journalist for the Guardian newspaper. And I've been contacted by different journalists from different sources with the same kind of interesting questions. So they frame it as a generational difference. So this idea of Gen Z, right? So they're basically describing it as people that are now in their 20s. Or a little bit younger. Let's just talk about people in their 20s. They're basically, their idea is that people in their 20s now, certainly in the UK, there's this idea that they don't have the skills to talk on the telephone, and that they are scared to talk on the telephone. And I think, so this is how the journalists come to talk to me. They said, okay, we're doing an article on why people in their 20s are now afraid to talk on the telephone and answer the telephone. What's your position on this? And so I think this is an interesting thing to talk about. So we had a really long 1 hour chat. Of course, I talked to 1 hour for the journalist, and then it gets reduced down to like one sentence in the article. But the results of this conversation kind of informed the rest of this kind of talk, and also this article. And it was an interesting, so what the journalist, Kate McKinsey, I think her name was doing was she spent an entire week and she banned herself from using messaging apps or social media. And she would only allow herself to reach her friends by calling them. And she did it for a whole week. I don't think she gave her friends any warning. Needless to say, they were a little bit concerned. And so you've got this really nice quote here. No, I'm not phoning to say I'm dying. Clearly from a friend who's like, why are you calling me? You can just message me that, right? And it was, it's a fun little article reflecting on both the unexpected upsides and some of the challenges of having live conversation rather than just sending messages. But I think this is kind of what it goes back to, is that when you take a step back and look at the problem, why is it we don't call? So calling and messaging, if you just focus on that as a simple distinction, the choice between calling a friend and sending them a text message or WhatsApp message or whatever your platform is, one of those is synchronous and the other is asynchronous. So, one you can just send and the person can pick it up, and you quickly, and ironically, you can then quickly, when they're there, you can go back and forth on text message. But also they cannot pick it up right away, and they can pick it up when it suits them, right? So that's particularly good right now with my family back home in England. Obviously having a live conversation right now at 2 o'clock in the morning wouldn't be very good, right? Whereas a live conversation on the telephone requires people to be available. And this fits back into another area we've done a lot of research in, which is basically planning of work days. And in a nutshell, our days are completely stacked, completely overpacked. So that's why I show this cartoon. So a PhD student that Anna Cox and I are working with, Joanna Amaguli. So Joanna's reaching the end of her PhD, and she's done a series of studies published as papers at CSCW and Chi Work, both this year and last year, and interested in looking at people who work in academia. We just focus on that group because it's easy to, let's be honest, an easy to access group. But we're basically looking at busy professionals, knowledge workers, and how they go about planning their work day. So what do you want to do at the beginning of the day, and what do you actually get done at the end of the day? And yeah, and so the long story short here is you all know that. You all know the answer to this question. You start the day with the idea of 7 things you want to do, and by the end of the day, you'll have done 2, right? And you'll finish the day going, you'll feel sad, right? Why did I not get all done what I wanted to get done? And the reality is that you failed to account for all the unexpected things that happened. But what we also looked at was people's ability to estimate how long things would take. So we discover things like well-known planning fallacies. I'm going to work on this talk. I'll finish it in an hour. And actually it takes 8 hours and you're still not done, right? So again, a well-known documented bias in human decision-making is our ability to plan activities. We're just awful at it. You know, if you say to somebody, how long is it going to take you to do this task? And they give you an answer, the smart managers should go, okay, let's double it and then add a bit more, right? It's going to take, you know, people are always over-optimistic in how, because they want to give you a positive answer, right? And we lie to ourselves all the time. The one thing that people were quite good at, though, were meetings, right? So meetings were an interesting space where there's quite a lot of discipline around start and end times of meetings. And I think that's kind of both a good thing and a bad thing. It's good that we all start meetings at the same time. It's respectful of each other's times. It's when we come together to do some stuff. I worry about the kind of end time, though. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on people, if you manage busy schedules, having fixed end times. It allows you to, yes, start the next meeting. But, you know, so many of these meetings are artificially padded out, and you'll get people there filling time, wasting each other's time to fill the hour, or the hour is not enough, and when you're right in the flow and really making that progress, you know, it needs to run a bit longer, you can't. So I think this is something that we've been talking about, is how to better design, particularly planning tools for meetings, to think about the start and end times and how to accommodate that. Yeah, I think start times are good, but flexible end times would be the key there, or allow for that kind of flexibility buffering within the system. Obviously, the short answer to this, of course, AI will make things better, right? We'll see. But to link it back to this idea of calling, I think what we learned from Joanna's work is that we overcommit to everything and as a result under-deliver. And we leave very little time for unplanned connections. So that's why when you receive that call from, you know, instead I think, do we all do this, right? So if you're calling with a relative or a close friend, you schedule a time to have that call through messaging first, right? This is a common thing you guys do, yeah? So you schedule a time, we'll talk at 2 o'clock on Sunday. It's almost like you treat it like a work activity, even though you're calling your close family member, right? Everything's become like work. And so I think that's why there's a lot of overlap here with Joanna's work. And this is why the journalist here, Kate, was finding her friends were finding it so unsettling to be called out of the blue, and wondered, are you calling to say you're dying? Like, is this a big deal? Yeah, exactly. It crossed the threshold. But it's worse than that, because on social media again has become really toxic in the sense that those people that do post status updates, there's less of a need to call them. So what are you calling for? Those, you know, when I was growing up, we'd have those calls with family members on a Sunday afternoon. And it was like when I started this talk telling you about the kind of Christmas summary. This is what I've been doing for the last week. This is what I've been doing for the last month. What have you been doing? You sit there and listen and tell your stories. that's been replaced now by people putting stuff on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on whatever platform you're on. And there people are talking about the things that they're proud of, the school they got into, the results they got, the paper they got accepted. So honestly, what's the point calling them now when you've just learnt about it scrolling while waiting for your train? And so this is the challenge, is that we've got too much content in a way. So I'm going to shift now. So that's kind of closing down the idea of talking on the telephone live. One last thing, and then we're going to start wrapping up. I want to think about messaging. So messaging is good, you know. Asynchronous, that's great. You don't have to have a live conversation. I can send you a message. You can send one back to me. That's great. And I'm going to focus now on email, the mother of all messaging platforms. WhatsApp is all email. So the trouble with email is that it starts out with your first email, and that's exciting. But really, it looks like this. And the problem is that we all live, if we could do a sample around the room, how many unread messages, what do you reckon the median number would be? I mean, I don't know, it all come down. We could focus on email and WhatsApp and other messages. Are we talking, is it going to be, has anyone got a 0 inbox? Or is it going to be like tens, hundreds? I always like it when you look over at that friend with that senior colleague and they've got 10,000 unread emails, right? Yeah? And so the challenge then becomes giving that, you know, you can see this one that, how to give attention to that one, right? And this is the problem we've created. We've created in our personal computers and our phones the ability to message each other, but we're kind of, it's this, at the core of it is this many-to-one problem. There are many people potentially messaging you, and you've got a focal point of attention that you need to give to each message in turn to process it. Last summer, my daughter went to see Taylor Swift at the Eras tour. So this is Taylor Swift's grand tour. So she came to London for several nights, 2 stops, and it was the biggest show in town, right? And I don't know if you've been, we knew all about it. So one of the things that happens in the Taylor Swift Eras tour, you've got a stadium filled with hundreds of thousands of fans, and she picks one child and pulls them out of the crowd and has this moment with one crowd member and gives her her hat. So you can imagine if you were to attend this conference, you would feel, that's going to be me, right? I'm going to be the one that's chosen out of all these 80,000 people. I'm the one that's going to be the selected one, right? And it's a bit like, that's probably how my inbox feels like to many people sending messages, right? Or vice versa, right? If I send an email to Yang Ji, it's the same thing. It's like, I hope he's going to pick me today to reply to. And that's the kind of system we've designed. So I'm going to tell you about one last paper, and then we're going to start wrapping up. And that's this prioritizing unread emails. I really love this paper, so proud of it. So this was published in Human-Computer Interaction Journal a couple of years ago. And it was looking at this problem. So the basic problem that we all face every day, which is when you're confronted with either your phone or your laptop, and you open up a platform like email, but honestly, it could also be WhatsApp as well, or any messaging platform. There is a sea of unread messages, right? So of the 100 unread emails, which one do you choose to reply to first? So it's an age-old problem, right, for the digital era. And what we did was a naturalistic experiment. And this is why I love this paper, because it was a nice methodology we used. So we recruited participants, and we sent them emails to their real email account for a week. We sent them 360 emails, so quite a lot of emails during the week. Over 15 days, sorry, more than a week, so over 2 weeks. And the emails varied. So I mean, you could tell they were from the email game. That's what we called it, the email game. And then we varied the features of that email. So what you had to do as a participant is you had to reply to this email. And when you replied and you met certain conditions, we gave you points. So we gamified it. And we all know what, and then there was a leaderboard. And I don't need to say anything more. People went to town on this. They wanted to win, right? And I think we gave them some money, but honestly, we didn't need to give them money. The idea of just beating your colleagues, being the best emailer. So yeah, this was a game, and we made it competitive, and people went to town. And so what happened is the emails you received varied in the number of points you got, how quickly the reply window was. It was either very short or it was very long, 20 minutes or a few hours or 24 hours. And so if you replied after that, you didn't get the points. The complexity of the response was also given as well, and also how much information we gave you as well. So in a way, we're kind of capturing on particularly this idea of urgency and importance. So do you need to reply to this quickly or not? And is it worth a lot of points or not? So important or not? And it was an interesting finding that in a nutshell, it can be summarized again, going back to our basic, biases in human decision making, which is shown over and over and over and over again in different contexts, is that urgency trumps importance. If you want to grab somebody's attention, you don't say, this is an important thing I need you to do. You say, come quick, right? And it works every time, right? And that was a real pattern in this data, is that when people had to make quick decisions, they were irrational. They weren't triaging rationally. Whereas when they kind of left the emails to kind of stack up over time and look at them more carefully, then they were prioritizing according to value. Critically though, only 65% even got a response. So the amount of stuff that was missed was quite high. And this goes back to the main point here, is that we're just swimming in too much communication. We're doing this to ourselves. I really love this paper. It's not by us, but by Gloria Mark. Gloria Mark's been leading in this area for a while on multitasking and interruptions and attention management. And this paper was back in 2012. It was anyway, what they did is they worked in an office environment, and they banned email for a week. Does that sound like your idea of heaven? I don't know. It's quite nice. So they banned people from using email at work for a whole week, and people had to stand up and go talk to each other. It's a bit like the journalist who was calling her friends. Critically, then they turned it back on again, and it wasn't a big deal, because email is just a lot of noise. There's a lot of spam in there. If you're interested in this topic and want to know more, Gloria Mark's written this really nice book, Attention Span, a popular press book, but basically talking about the kind of the design choices we've made and the kind of work we've been doing as well in interruptions and multitasking, the interesting design choices we made, and how these wonderful devices are both the best thing of our era and really quite problematic as well. And I think it really is quite an interesting cultural artifact when you take a step back and look at what we've created as a tool. And it comes back to the old psychology idea. William James, right? Everyone knows what attention is. Everyone knows what attention is. It's taking a position in the mind in clear and vivid form of several possible things and bringing it into the focus of attention. And I think it's worth closing on this idea. So whether or not you're making a choice to give your attention away to these platforms, it's happening, right? We have limited attentional capacity. That is a simple fact. And by paying attention to one thing, you're choosing to not pay attention to the world around you sometimes. And that's something to, I think, encourage a reflection on. Bill Gates knew it back in 2005. He saw the value in our attention and how it could be commoditized to make money. And in the age of AI, it's a new source of data to train these models better. It's going to be incredibly valuable. The issue is, though, I don't think we as individuals have quite clicked yet that our attention is the product, and we're suckers. We gave it away for free. Right? We've given our attention away to these platforms and to these companies for nothing. And I wonder, I'm going to give a talk at the weekend at the conference on AI. And, it does make me stop and pause and think, as we're all starting to use ChatGPT and the other large language models, what are we sharing? What are we giving away? And when are we going to wake up and be like, oh, that was a mistake, right? So yeah, I think I just want to close with an invitation, really. We spend a lot of time on our devices. It's just it's reflexive. Antti Olasvirta had this nice paper about habits, and it's almost like an impulsive reflex. You can't help but, idle wait times. There's been studies done of like watching people at elevators. Like, how long do you have to wait for the elevator before people pick up their phone and start scrolling? It's a matter of seconds, right? My invitation to you is to try and fight that impulse and just see what else you can see. Pay attention to the world around you. There's a rich and wonderful world out there. And it's ironic for a professor of HCI to say, put your devices down. But hey, we invented the crack and now we're trying to get people off it, right? And same with Apple, they've done the same thing with developing their fitness apps, right? They realized they got everyone sitting there on their screens all day long and then they're like, let's see if we can get you moving again. But I think it's all about a balanced diet. And so I think critically, I would just invite a reflection on what it is you hope to get from these devices, first of all. So I think my biggest issue primarily, and that's kind of what drove this article, is a lot of consumption, particularly on social media, is passive. It's entertain me, not going with a purpose. I'm going to find out, I want to contact, it's more just amuse me. And I just wonder, when you get to the end of your days and you look back, in the same way that I reminisced of connecting with my friends, what the next generation will reflect on. That was really great looking at those videos and those memes. I remember the memes of that era. Is that going to be the next kind of cultural reference point of how life was spent? And there'll be like nostalgia for memes of previous generations? That makes me a little bit sad to think that might be what it'll be. So yeah, go for a walk. And in fact, that's why I'm here, right? We could have done this online. I could have been broadcasted digitally from home. But no, we still see value in this, coming together, spending time together, going for walks in the night market, eating food together. These are the important human values. And on our digital life, it's a half-life. So let's remember the important things there as well. Thank you so much.